Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. The South is full of accidental monuments. Where I live in North Carolina, old barns and abandoned cabins are common. After the Civil War, African Americans had their freedom, but not much else. Many of them stayed in the same areas, even in the same cabins, where they had lived as enslaved people. Now they worked for shares of the crops they tended. There are many individual stories. What was it like to live as a sharecropper?
My name is Sylvester Hoover, and I was born here, I was raised here, and I was educated right here in the Mississippi Delta. So I was born in 1957, and I was raised in the cotton field. And I grew up on a plantation on Money Road, the Whittington Plantation, and we were sharecroppers, and we picked the cotton, but we never could break even or make money. This is a cotton sack. This is a 9-foot cotton sack, and we all used to pick this bag full of cotton, and when it get full, it weigh approximately 200 pounds. When I was too young to pick cotton, my mom used to put me on the back of the bag, and she pulled me through the cotton field while she picked the cotton. And eventually I started picking cotton about the time I was 6 or 7 years old. It's a tough job. It's a tough job picking cotton, because if you pick cotton, you got to be really cautious when you're picking this cotton, because it got little points on it that it would stick you in the fingers if you don't pick it right. So you would have to put your fingers between these things here, and you pull it out like this. And that's the way you pull it out, because you don't want to touch these little sharp parts right here, because these little parts would stick your fingers and it would start bleeding. So you kind of had to put your hand between this and pull it out. You go to work when you can see and stay at work till you cannot see. And that's why they said we work from can to can't. You would have this bag full by lunchtime. So if you start at 7 o'clock in the morning, at 12 o'clock, you would have this bag full, and it would be approximately 200 pounds. And then when you go back, you would probably pick another bag, or maybe a little bit more than a bag, because you have 7, 8 hours there. So you would probably pick a bag and a half during that time. You would probably pick approximately 500 pounds of cotton a day. And that's a bale of cotton a day. When a sack of cotton get full, they would bring it to the trailer, and you would weigh it up on these scales. And this scale here that goes to 200 pounds. So the average bag would be between 190 and 200 pounds. I chop cotton too, and chopping cotton is a really hard job. Because when you chopping, you talking about over 100 degrees. And that sign gonna burn you, it gonna blister your body. And we didn't wear short sleeves because you blister. So everybody would have long sleeve hats and scarf all around their neck. Looked like they wrapped up for the cold, but they wrapped up for the heat. This reminds me of the way I was brought up. It was the way I lived it. These houses are the typical houses that we lived in here in the Mississippi Delta. Design is a shotgun house. You can open the front door and look completely through the house. And the reason they did that, the boss man could come up to your house and he could look and make sure nobody was inside the house. Make sure that everybody was at the cotton field working. My mom and dad had one room, and my sisters and brother, we shared one room, exception of my mom would separate the female from the male with a sheet across the middle of the room. And we had a kitchen with a stove, a wooden stove, and a table in it. So your day started early, around 6 a.m. or earlier. But you're gonna be at the barn, getting ready to go wherever you got to do at 7 a.m. We would feed the pigs and chickens before we go to work that morning. So we would feed them probably about 6:30 that morning. And we would come work on the garden during lunchtime. They grow pretty much everything they ate, but they really grew a lot of peas, green, okra, tomato. You know, we had peanuts. We had almost everything. Okay, this is a heater stove, and this thing would be hot all time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You always would have something on this stove cooking. You have turnip green, field peas, a killer with water in it so you could wash your hand. And my mom, it was 9 of us, and my mom always would have a big pot of turnip greens or field peas or something on this thing cooking at all times. The mom always would get off at 11 and come home, and she would fix lunch for the family. And my mom would cook cornbread in the ashes. She would pour it in the ashes, and we'll just eat just the center part of it, of the bread. This bed would sleep 4 people, and beds was everywhere. You would have beds in the kitchen. You wouldn't have a living room. You would have beds almost everywhere you could put a bed. If I see a quilt like this, it brings back memories of, you know, hard time ladies making these quilts, you know. This quilt was made by Miss Rosa Estrid. Miss Rosa was the lady at the burial of Robert Johnson. She's the last person to see Robert Johnson on earth. When you sharecropping, they supposed to 50, it's 50-50. But what it is, they're gonna always have you in debt. And they kept you in debt because they did the book work. You never were gonna get out of debt. It didn't matter how many bales of cotton you picked. We picked 50 bales of cotton. And my dad said, boy, we had a good year. We picked 50 bales of cotton. And when he got ready to sell up with the boss man said the identical same thing. Said, you had a good year. You picked 50 bales of cotton. You almost broke even. You owe me $200. And my mom would just start crying. Said, we're never gonna get out of debt. We're never gonna get out of debt. And they would let him come home and wallow in that for 2 or 3 days, you know, that didn't make any money. You know, it's Christmas time, you didn't have anything for your kids. And the boss man would come to the house a couple of days after you almost broke even. And he would say, if you want to borrow some money, you can go up to the commissary and we'll lend you some money. If you didn't get anything from his store, you're gonna still owe him. He's gonna make your light bill high. He's gonna do something that make you owe him. And you just couldn't get out of debt with him. And that was the reason he didn't want you out of debt, because you was a good labor. You was a good field hand. He could make money off of you. So, you know, I don't want you to leave. So if you owe me, you cannot leave the plantation, and your family can't leave the plantation. Or you go to the bus station and buy a ticket. And the people at the bus station will call back and tell the boss man, I got Frank Hoover son here catching the bus. Is that okay? And then these bosses said, no, he ain't got no business catching no bus. They owe me. So he'll get you and bring you back. You didn't have much trouble out of the people who owned the plantation. You had more trouble out of the rider of the plantation. I mean, we didn't say no because you couldn't say it to the boss man. It wasn't even in our vocabulary. Whatever the boss man say, you had to say, yes, sir. You could get a year in jail. You could get hung for just walking down the street during daylight hours, because if you was black, you had to be in somebody's cotton field working. Wasn't no excuses. Black people, they always had a fear of white people would come do something to them. And it was a true fear. I mean, they lived it that way. That's the way they lived. If you strong-minded black person on the plantation, and you would tell, you said, man, you could do better than what you're doing. You could do this, you could do that. You's not gonna be around long. You're gonna either go to jail or end up missing. What happened to John? Last time I seen him, he was going home last night. I don't know what happened to him. He never shows back up. He ended up in the Tallahatchie River. If that river ever dry up, ain't no telling what you might see. And the church was just a healing place. whatever trouble you in, you go to the church, and most of the people gonna come to the church, and they gonna pray with you, and they gonna help you get your problem straight, whatever it is. They gonna work with you. They was your family. And this church been a big part of my life, my entire life, and been a big part of this community for 145 years. My early schooling was started in the church because we really didn't have a public school to go to. Most educated person on the plantation would probably be the one that teach you. After you finish picking cotton, you would go to school for November, December, and January. They built Money School in 1963. That's the year they built Money School. That was the first time they've been able to go to a regular school. I'm the only one that graduated from high school at my whole family out of 9. And we would sneak from school and go across the railroad track to that store. And the principal would whoop our butt for going to that store, but he wouldn't tell us why. He said, don't go to those stores. You know, nobody would talk about Emmett Till. And he was whooping our butts because he was scared we might get in trouble like Emmett Till did, see. But he wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't tell us what was happening. Nobody would talk about Emmett Till. I mean, it put a lot of stain on a lot of people's heart, and still do. But civil rights passed since like 65, something like that. But we didn't get civil rights here till 71. And I didn't go through the same thing in the Delta that my older sisters and brothers went through. My dad, when he got ready to vote, they came up here talking about voting rights, civil rights, and all this stuff. And they asked him to pay a poll tax. He didn't have no money to pay the poll tax. And then they told him, write a paragraph of why you want to vote. I mean, these people couldn't write a sentence. And they would come to the church, and that's what they would talk about, voting and civil rights and human rights and all that kind of stuff. They'd be right here at the church. My mom, she said her brother learned her how to read when she was 2 years old, and she loved it to read. She was a smart lady because she always read. When we got 15 years old, my mama would sneak us to Chicago, and we would get a part-time job and we'd finish our education. And that's how she got all us out the Delta. But my sisters, she would send them to Chicago when they got 13 years old because she didn't want the boss man flirting with her daughters. Because if the boss man tell you, I want your daughter to start working at my house, you know that's bad trouble. The only way you could leave the Delta, you could sneak out. You know, somebody come through with a car you catch a ride with, or hobo the train to get out. That was the only way you could get out the Delta. And we just never had, you know, any dealing with the plantation owner kid. But once he got out of college and came back, like I say, he was a hippie and all that, and he took over the plantation. He just was a different kind of guy. And my dad and them would call him Mr. Billy because he was a white guy. And then he said, you don't have to call me Mr. You don't call me Mr. You older than I am. I said, why are you calling me Mr.? You know? And he just changed the whole rules of the way the plantation was ran, and he ran it in a lot better way, in a nicer way, and people liked him because he was all right with people. My family, they stayed on the plantation a long time. My family left the plantation in 81 or 82. And I don't see how we made it. I really don't know. I mean, we made it because of grace of God, because our living condition was terrible. And this was one of the most famous musicians ever lived in the Mississippi Delta, Robert Johnson. And Robert Johnson was the type of guy that all he did was told a story about his life. He didn't think about, I'm gonna sing hellhounds on my heel. He felt like hellhounds on his heel. And all he was doing was telling a story of his life. And you know, look at this land, flat land. The land shaped the music and the music shaped the land. And the music was kind of like a tonic. Whatever ailed them, they felt like blues could heal them. I would define sharecropping as slavery with a different name. And when I look at cotton, I don't look at cotton like a pair of jeans. I look at cotton as back-breaking work. The cotton was gold. Everybody who affiliated with the cotton got rich, exception of the person that did all the hard work.
Don't this Delta look lonesome when that evening sun goes down?
For better or worse, we always share in the crop that was sown yesterday. We shape the land through cultivation, but the land also shapes us. How will we share the crop tomorrow? Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as a rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.